First of all, I want to thank Advocacy Focus for inviting us to give a little bit of a 10-15 minute forward look at this. We are big advocates of mental health within the workplace. In fact, so much so that Laura, who had Forrest earlier, has been on mental health first training with Advocacy Focus, actually. And, as a business, we treat it extremely importantly. Hopefully, in the next 10 minutes or so, just show some things that what we do when we talk about technology and how that impacts our mental health, and what we've learned from Advocacy Focus as well, and how we've worked together on these kind of things. Ultimately, Serian is a Microsoft Gold partner who provide technology solutions. So we actually implement the kind of things that actually can be detrimental for mental health and your work-life balance. But when we do that, we want to do it in a certain way that we can advise and look at the benefits to actually use these technology solutions to avoid overworking, working outside of hours too much, and provide data and analytics to basically give you the power to make better choices about your work-life balance. And that's what I'm going to go through this morning. Just when we start, though, what we have noticed quite a lot is there's a return to work situation happening from furlough, and also businesses spinning back up into the office and into the workplace. And those have caused a few challenges that we're seeing from our customer base and anecdotally with the leaders and managing directors we work with. And I just wanted to cover these first to begin with, if I'm honest, because there's a few things that organizations can do that will de-stress the kind of return to the office, and that has a positive impact on people's mental health. The first, what we're seeing is over the last 12 months through this pandemic, a lot of organizations have invested in their technology because they want to provide flexible working, or they were using age technology before that was coming end of life and was ready for change. And unfortunately, the pandemic kind of forced the move to something new. If the staff who've not been within the business or only in the business part-time through that period, coming back from that session away onto new technology can be a challenge and can be quite daunting. And it's very easy to say, oh, great, Bob, you're coming back to work next Monday, get back to your desk. And what they used before is completely different than it was the first time round. So if you have made a big change to your technology stack, so you may have implemented a hosted phone system or a cloud-based system, or using Teams, which we're obviously using today more and more, which wasn't used before, we very much recommend you update your training procedures and protocols to staff who come back, because it can be stressful coming back after a period of time and not knowing how to work that you did 12 months ago, 6 months ago. And very much, actually referencing Laura, maternity cover is a good example of this. You come back and things can change. So we do recommend that heavily a lot, and get your IT providers to maybe put a quick crib sheet together of what's changed and how you work now, or how you the technology you use to help do that. What we've also seen a significant amount of is IT equipment which hasn't been used for a period of time. You come and turn it back on and it doesn't work. Now that ironically keeps me in a job, so I can't complain too much. But it is part of the coming back at 9 o'clock on a Monday, and ultimately, adding to the stress levels of actually your machine going through 3 or 4 hours of Windows updates, Microsoft release updates on a regular basis. And if you've not turned your machine on in a while, then it can have a negative effect on how long it can take to get backing up to working properly. So again, turn your machine on a few days beforehand, get somebody in the office to run round and press the on button while people are out, and get them all turned on, and that'll work massively well for people who come back. Flexible working, what we're seeing a lot of in this regard, which impacts people's mental health, is actually a serious lack of demarcation between your house and your home life and your work life. So, we're sat in our home at the moment, which you can see from our cameras. I'm in an office here, and that door is the in and out of my work. When I walk past that door, I'm out of work. When I walk in it, I'm in work. But people were sat on the settees with their laptops on them, and in uncomfortable positions. And it's the same settee they watch Netflix at night. So the demarcation isn't there. Health and safety needs to be assessed. So have you got a good desk? Have you got a monitor? Have you got screens? Have you got a good chair that's suitable for you? So not really a technology issue, but we do recommend consider the home working environment as you would the work environment, and allow that demarcation to be in your staff's mind, so they can have that work-life balance that matters. And very lastly on this slide, what we see not being looked at, if I'm honest, is the data protection that's required for flexible working. And it's not really massively towards mental health in this regard, but we put it in here because it's so important. If you're an organisation who deals with sensitive data, and within your bricks and mortar building that was protected quite easily because all your screens were facing inwards, you trusted the environment. We've unfortunately seen quite a few instances now where people at home working, their screens will face the window and people walking past can see the information that's on their screen. You might have people who live with their parents working from home, and they're on the kitchen table and parents are walking back past their screen, and that causes some data protection challenges. And even though we're not specifically talking about the topic here, we would heavily recommend you consider that within your organisation as well, because ultimately that will lead to stress if people do lose data or you have challenges around that. The main focus of what we wanted to talk about, though, today was that work-tech balance and how technology can be a huge benefit to flexible working. But in the same token, it can be a huge negative, if I'm honest, because you ultimately feel like you're forever connected, and that can be not what you want when you've got a lot of work going on. So there's a few tips and tricks we've got here that we were going to show you that hopefully can help you find that work-life balance in a better way. Most people we work with use Office 365, so all this is related to that. 99% of people we work with use it. And there are a few things that work really well. Most people will get email on their phones. So if you've got an iPhone or an Android device, you might be using the native app to get your email. If you use the Outlook app that has no cost, it has something called quiet hours. And quiet hours is a way that you can stop out the Outlook app pinging you when you get an email. So turn it off at 7 o'clock at night, at 10 o'clock at night, or whatever works on your work-life balance. You can say, don't pester me in my quiet hours, which could be whenever you decide to be. And in the app here, hopefully you can see that on the screen, you can see that you can turn these on and off. That's very much the same for Teams. Now, Teams is a brilliant solution. We're on it now. It's Teams, Zoom, basically made the pandemic, well, not bearable at all by any stretch of the imagination, but definitely allowed people to continue working remotely and how we work now. But unfortunately, Teams also pesters you all the time. When you get messages, it'll send you pop-ups, and it will ultimately want you to read the information. It has the ability, though, in its settings to decide where you get notifications from, what chats, if somebody mentions you, if it's a direct message, if it's a meeting update. And also it has quiet hours as well. And we would heavily recommend that you configure these to get that turn off at such a time, so you're not being pestered by people at work. When we were prepping for this meeting, Carolina did say something which really struck with me, actually. Managers or leaders of businesses traditionally will send emails at every hour of the day. And while they might say, oh, don't reply, wait till tomorrow, there's the kind of habitual need to reply to that email, or the want to reply to it. Using quiet hours turns off those notifications for you and gets that work-life balance into the best possible place. So again, if you're using Outlook app, we recommend it. It also has some really good security features over the native email apps on iPhones and Androids. And if you're using the Teams app on the mobile device, set up the quiet hours so you don't really get pestered when you don't want to. What we also see a lot of is what's called mental clutter. Mental clutter is very much information overload. You've got a million emails. You've got expectation to reply to these emails left, right, and centre. And you can procrastinate on tasks which are sat in your inbox. And sometimes a bit of organisation plays a large part in terms of mental clutter and your own mental well-being. And I know personally this is how I work to keep on top of a large number of emails and structure me in my inbox as best as possible. So a couple of things that are quite useful. First one, there's a third-party application called Simplifile, and I'll put the link in the chat for you. It's about 35 quid a year. It adds into Outlook this section here, and what it does is it will basically organise your basically organize your emails. So if you get a lot of emails and you file them away and you sometimes feel a bit overloaded by how many you've got, it will guess where the emails go and it'll move them for you. So it saves a bit of time. It's very efficient, but it also then keeps a nice clean inbox and it can help you keep on top of the workload you have. And for 35 quid a year, to be honest, it's an absolute no-brainer. What we see a lot of our customers use as well within Outlook is the categorization of emails. So prioritizing what you need to work on now, what can wait till later in the week or next week, and using the categories. And you just right click on the emails and you can choose a category. You can set up bespoke categories which work fit your work-life balance. But ultimately, it's a way of making sure that if you've got 100 emails, you can focus on the ones that you really need to focus on. You can push aside the ones which aren't that important at this point in time and work through that list. And sometimes getting a grasp of 100 emails in an organized manner can make a big difference, actually. And again, the Outlook does this one by default at no cost. And organizing your emails through Simplifile can actually, to be honest, it changed my world. I'm a SAG geek, but it did. You know, you have loads of emails, loads of files, and then actually, if you have loads of files, it helps you find the emails later on as well. And then, very lastly, on the work tech balance, turn off. We advocate within Serian, find what is your turn off from work. And I know that seems very strange as a person who manages a number of people within our organisation. I actually literally say to my staff, what is it that turns you off your work? You know, we've got people now, we're all geeks, so there'll be some references, you know, Marvel films or comics or playing computer games, or we have we've got a football team now where they go on a Thursday night and play football and go to the pub. Find what that is, turn off from the screen time that you have, because ultimately, you know, we said to our kids, don't have a lot of screen time. It's the same principle, you know, you're looking at your screen all the time. Find what it is that turns you off and resets your brain. And we, as an organisation, we advocate that, and we found that to be actually more productive for the staff within the working hours, and heavily recommend that. What I wanted to just cover as well briefly was the tech that's included in Office 365 for mindfulness. So within every subscription, bar 2, within Office 365, you get something called My Analytics. Now, in your Outlook ribbon at the top, you'll see this little Insights button. If it's not there, speak to your IT provider and they'll get it turned on for you if you've got the subscription, which generically most people have. And what that does is read take data from your emails and Teams throughout the month. And what that basically gives you is some proactive pointers to how you can reset some of your quiet time, but also time that you can use to focus. So when you click that button, you get these screenshots. Some of these are from mine. And what it'll do is it'll proactively set lunch hours for you. Again, going back to this demarcation of working from home and not working from home, the lunch hour kind of doesn't exist anymore, because you're in the workplace, you move to somewhere for lunch usually. At home, I go down to the kitchen, which isn't very far. So, you know, setting lunch hours, it can do that. What it can also do is plan time away to do large bulk work, which sometimes people find difficult for their mental health because they've got a lot going on, but they need to focus on 3 or 4 hours of work, and it can plan that for you. It can also prompt you for people to follow up on that it thinks you need to follow up quickly, or book time to focus. What it does actually really well is it'll give you analytics. So we pulled this from somebody, and what this shows you is this person has had 1,100 emails, 700 which were sent, but also the times of day those emails were read and sent, and when Teams was used as well in chats. Now, this can be used in people's appraisals if they're willing to share it, or PDPs, because it shows very clearly that, you know, you're not turning off. Basically, you're still reading emails at 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night, and that might not be, you know, counterproductive for that person. It might be impacting their mental health. And the data here really gives, you know, it makes the conversation easier with the line manager and the people supporting those staff members, because it shows their working life balance and whether that's great or not, and changes to suit. Now, you know, with this person, might be happy with that, might be, you know, happy that that's the way they work their day. You know, they read emails at night to stop for example, you know, getting the problem at 9 o'clock in the morning. It might not be, but that's what the data is there for, to help show it. And also, people usually don't know when they're reading emails or replying to emails. And this can be quite an eye-opener for yourself, if I'm honest, to have a look and have a play. What it'll also do is count how many days in a month you didn't touch your phone when you're supposed to, basically, or touch your laptop. So this shows quiet days. What it means by that is times after your working day. So it knows your working day, or you tell it, should I say. If you use your email or Teams outside of them working hours, it will flag it as you've not used a quiet day. So again, in this instance, out of a full working month, there were only 4 days, including weekends, that weren't used on the phone. So it's not great, really, for that work-life balance. But again, my analytics shows that and can do that. So heavily recommend having a look. You might surprise yourself with when you use your emails and when you don't, and your Teams. But also, if you're willing to share it with your line manager, it can be a good way of looking at the data as well. Very lastly, just wanted to talk about Microsoft Teams. A few things that we've done within a business, some we've actually kindly stolen from advocacy as well, which has helped bring together people outside of the business, because again, cards on the table, I think every organisation has gone or going through this. We have people working from home who feel can sometimes feel a little bit disjointed from being in the office. So we want to try and bring them together, and Teams can play a large part in that. So what we've done is we are a big advocate of setting up informal chats, where they will basically talk to each other in their groups, cliques, etc. From a compliance standpoint, 365 will still be able to search those chats and report on them if there's any issues down the line, but it ultimately will allow you to do that. Set up a lunchroom so people can drop in on there remotely, so they can all chat about it, talk about football, talk about line of duty and all the other things like they do, and get a life-based chat in there about charity work and all the other things that go on. Very lastly, do use the mobile app. I know I've just said turn it off on a previous slide, so I don't want to contradict myself. Please use the mobile app for Teams. It's really good. You can do meetings, you can do work outside. I dropped my kid off at school the other week, and there was some noise coming from another dad's pocket, and he was on a meeting while on dropping his kid off. But fair enough. But remember the notification settings. You can configure Teams left, right, and centre to make sure that you don't get notified on certain triggers or elements. And if you set up the notification settings, it becomes a very good work-life balance tool. I apologise if I've flown through that, but I know we're on the clock today. If you've we've got some questions that have come in to the chat, which we'll go through at the end. We've got a Q&A session at the end of this, but hopefully that was a quick whistle-stop tour of what 365 can kind of give you around the kind of functionality of getting that work-life balance there. So appreciate your time, and I'll pass back to Carolina now.
Thank you very much, Mark. I don't know if it's my internet or if it might have been your connection, but the video was breaking up a bit. So if it's my connection and I start breaking up, will you just let me know, please?
No problem.
Thank you. So before we kind of start talking about mental health, I just wanted to do a brief introduction of our charity. So you might have heard about Advocacy Focus, you might have not, you might know what advocacy is, you might have not, but we just wanted to do a quick intro really. So we're a health and social care charity. We provide advocacy services across Lancashire, Trafford, St Helens, Rochdale and Bradford, and we support adults, children and young people to basically live the lives that they want to live. So we support people living in the community, in care homes, hospitals. We support children in care. And it's all about making sure that those people are involved in any decisions that are being made about their health and social care. And it's all about empowering the person to have their voices heard and to make sure that the professionals are listening to their views, wishes and feelings. So I'm very proud to be able to say that every day we're helping people live the lives that they want to live. I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to say that. In some ways that's my job. So when I send the slides, I will also include a short video just in case you are interested in learning a bit more about advocacy. You can watch that and learn a little bit more about what we do. So what we're going to talk about for the rest of the session, so we're going to cover why we need to talk about mental health. We're going to look at some facts and figures around stigma, myths and discrimination. We're also going to discuss self-care and the importance of self-care, and also signposting and support, as well as the further training that Advocacy Focus offers to help you and your companies implement mental health initiatives in your workplaces. So hopefully that all sounds good to you, and we'll get cracking really. So why do we need to talk about mental health? Well, despite people saying, oh, you know, it's talked about so much more these days, it's so much better, unfortunately, there are still a lot of people whose attitudes are stopping others from getting the help and support that they need. There's still people that feel isolated, ashamed, and even worthless by the fact that they're living with mental ill health. And I always like to share this statistic, and even though it is shocking and it is difficult to hear, I think it just really shows that we do still need to carry on having these conversations, and that is the fact that in 2018, 6,154 people completed suicide. So that's about 16 people each day that took their life. And I think that's just really eye-opening, and it just really shows us that we need to carry on having these conversations. And of course, you know, work is such a big part of our lives. So it just really makes sense that we are having these conversations within the workplace as well, because unfortunately, if you're unwell, you're not going to just be able to switch it off for the working day and then go back to feeling unwell just in your own time. So it is going to affect people in the workplace. It is going to affect their productivity. It is going to affect their relationship with colleagues, even potentially. And actually, there was Mind survey that found that 30% of the respondents didn't feel able to open up to their manager. So there's also a real issue here of people struggling with their mental health and not feeling able to open up within the workplace. And as well as that, they found that 56% of employers wanted to help their employees with their well-being, but they just didn't know how to. They didn't feel like they had the right training and guidance. And this is where we step in. We want to help you and other businesses to provide the support. And ultimately, this is going to save you money as well as a business. It's going to help you get those people back in work, making sure they're being productive when they're working. And I'm not sure if you guys know this, I always find this statistic quite shocking as well, but 12.7% of sickness absences are actually related to mental health conditions, and UK businesses lose billions every year through presenteeism, which is when the person is in work, but they're maybe not being productive or not producing quality work because of being unwell. And also absenteeism, which is when the person just does not go into work at all. So hopefully this gives you a bit of overview of how things are right now, and why we need to keep having these conversations and why we really need to put that support in place. And of course, COVID has had a massive impact on this. Now, the statistics on this slide are from June 2020. So really, we were just at the start of the pandemic at that time. So I'll be really interested to see the figures from June 2021. But this found that 1 in 5 adults were feeling some form of depression during the pandemic, as well as 84% feeling that their well-being was affected, those feelings of stress and anxiousness. And just to give you a bit of a comparison, that 1 in 5 used to be 1 in 10 before the pandemic. So you can really see how there's so many more people struggling because of what we're going through. And I know that we're kind of going back to normal, whatever normal is going to be like, but we're going to see the impact of this as people start to return to work. And like Mark was talking about, people that have maybe been furloughed for all this time, it's going to be a big transition getting back into the workplace, whether they're going to be working from home or whether they're going to be in the office. But also for those people that have been working all throughout, that have been kind of dealing with the pressures of work, as well as the pressures of living through a health pandemic, there is going to be a lot of anxiousness returning to the office environment. There is going to be a lot of stress and a lot of people that are not really going to know how to cope with the fact that life is kind of reopening again. So we want to do a quick activity and hopefully people can get involved with this, just to kind of get us thinking about the language that we use when we talk about mental health. So I would encourage you to use the chat for this one, or you can unmute yourselves if you prefer, and just put some positive and negative words that you can think of when you hear mental health. So please get involved in the chat. So just throw in there any words that come to mind when you hear mental health. You can see there's people typing, which is great. You always worry when you do these webinars because you think, oh God, if people don't say anything, I'm just going to be stood here like a right numpty.
I'm sure
So
that's never the case.
Hidden, isolation, psycho. Yeah, you definitely hear that one a lot. Stress, difficulties managing, struggling. Could we get some positive words as well, maybe? See if crazy, self-care, well-being,
Creative. Yeah, that's a good one.
I like that. That's not one that comes up often, actually. I quite like creative. Meditation, mindfulness, self-awareness, awesome. So, I mean, as you can see, as soon as I asked the question, we just got the negative words straight away. And I think you will all know, as soon as I said it, this would have been straight in your mind, how much easier it is to think of those negative words. And the point of doing this exercise really is for us to be aware of that, of our own self-stigma, I suppose. Even though we are in this space, even though we have made the decision to attend this webinar and learn more about mental health, which shows that we're keen to learn and we're keen to make things better, we still have those thoughts in our heads sometimes. And that's okay, you know, that's the way that society has kind of been structured around a topic like mental health. There is a lot of stigma, and that's ultimately going to impact on everyone. But what I encourage you guys to do is to change that language that you use yourself, change those thoughts yourself. If someone says mental health and the first things that come to mind are negatives, try to start challenging yourself, try to start thinking of those positive words, because there's a lot of positivity in mental health as well. And actually, there's also a lot of positivity in mental ill health. There's recovery, you know, there's being creative. I think that was a really good word. I love that was brought up. And like I said, just think about the language that you're using when you're talking about mental health, and challenge it if you see those negative words being used all the time too. And this brings us on to our next slide, which is around defining stigma. So the definition that we tend to use at Advocacy Focus is the definition from Time to Change, which is a mental health project that has been running for quite a few years. And they define stigma as the perception that a certain attribute makes a person unacceptably, and I always emphasize the word unacceptably, different from others, leading to prejudice and discrimination against them. So I think from the words that we've just put in the chat, particularly the negative words, I think unfortunately we've all had experiences of either stigma towards ourselves or witnessing stigma and discrimination happening. And I wanted to share some stats around this as well, because it is really important that we are aware of this within the workplace, because it does still happen. You do still have stigma and discrimination in the workplace when it comes to mental health, and it's something that we need to be aware of. So in this survey, which is again a Time to Change survey, they found that 88% of people had experienced discrimination because of their mental ill health, and 60% said actually that the stigma and the discrimination that they had experienced were as damaging, if not more damaging, than the mental health problem itself. And I think 60% is a really high statistic. And if you think that, you know, like struggling with your mental health wasn't bad enough, you're then having to deal with all the stigma and discrimination around you as well. And the last one, which again, a really shocking statistic, 27% said that the stigma that they experienced made them want to give up on life. So I said earlier that often people say that, you know, things are getting better, people talk about mental health so much more. This opens our eyes that that's not really the case. Maybe it is a little better, but we still have a long way to go. So next we're going to be looking at personal safety, and the reason why we wanted to include personal safety and self-care in this session is because you do need to put your own oxygen mask first. You need to look after yourself to be able to support others and to be in a good place to support your colleagues and to do these things in your workplace. You can't pour from an empty cup, basically, is my point here. So how do you keep that personal safety? So having boundaries is a really good way of doing this. So it might be having a boundary of making sure that you explain your role within that mental health conversation. So making sure that you explain to the person how far your support can go. You know, no one expects you to be someone's counselor. You're just a listening ear, and hopefully you'll be able to signpost that person to access the support that they need. So make sure that you explain this when those conversations are started. And as well as this, is the topic that that person wants support with triggering for you? And if it is, maybe you're not the right person to be supporting them, because ultimately you need to look after yourself. And if that conversation is going to upset you or make you unwell, maybe it's better to signpost that person to somebody else that is going to be better positioned to have those conversations. And ultimately as well, obviously, make sure that you're aware of your organization's policies and guidelines and ensure that you stay within doors. You might have policies like safeguarding policies, for example. You might have things around supervisions and different types of support that your organization offers. So make sure that you familiarize yourself with those things too. So how do you look after yourself? How do you look after your own well-being? You know, be kind to yourself. Think about challenging that self-stigma. So when we were thinking about those words before, are you attributing those negative words to yourself when you are struggling? Challenge those thoughts. Respect your own boundaries. Try not to take somebody else's problems home with you. And I think Mark's example before of the office door is quite a good one. If you are working from home, try to leave, if you have that workspace, try to leave those problems in that workspace. And debriefing can be quite a good, useful thing to do. You know, if you have a particularly difficult conversation, speak to your manager or speak to a colleague and say, oh, I've just had this difficult conversation, it's made me really upset, I'm really worried, whatever it is. Remember, don't disclose any of the personal information of the person that has come to you. But, you know, get it off your chest as well. You know, ultimately, you're encouraging people to talk about their mental health. So make sure that you're talking about yours as well. And then last point on the slide there is welcoming you to download our Becoming Your Healthy Self toolkit. So they're series of booklets that we create. They're created by our advocacy focused wellbeing champions, and they just help you. We have one about stress, one about grief and bereavement, one about general mental health, and also one about young people's mental health. And there's one coming out each quarter. It's free to download, anyone can download them, and it's just kind of you open the booklet, you use one page or the other. It's not a you have to read a back-to-back type thing. Is you access it when you need it. It's got practical tips in there to look after your well-being, things like mindful journal templates, that sort of stuff. So really useful, really practical. I definitely encourage you guys to have a look, and when we send the slides, you're going to have the hyperlink for it as well. So when we do sessions like this, we always get asked, so what makes Advocacy Focus great? What gives you that authority to be talking about this? So we've included on here a slide of some of the things that as an organisation we provide to our employees. This is not an exhaustive list, there is a lot more, but they're kind of the headlights, if you will. So Active Focus is PT session that we have every week. This is something that our senior leadership team has brought on during the lockdown to encourage people to be physically active. So we do half an hour HIIT workouts every Tuesday. We get together over Teams. We have a personal trainer that the charity has hired to do this for us. And it's been really successful. There's a lot of staff that have really enjoyed it and really taken a lot from it. And you know, I think any kind of physical activity is good, but to be able to do a workout with an actual personal trainer, I think it's just been awesome. And it's really encouraged people to actually do those workouts more often through the week. So they maybe started doing it once a week on a Tuesday, and they're now going back to the recordings of the workouts and doing them on Thursday as well, maybe doing it on the weekend. So it's brought a lot of positivity in terms of people's physical well-being, which again then is going to impact on their mental health too. We also have a range of employee champions. So these champion roles are responsible for all different areas of the work that we do, but then also relates to well-being of our employees. So we have well-being champions, and they kind of look at raising awareness of mental health, physical health. They deliver different activities, training sessions throughout the year. We also have things like suicide champion, eating disorder champion. We have young people mental health champion, because the majority of our staff are also parents. So we found that providing the employee support to support their children was really important, because it was something that was causing strain on the employee themselves. And there's many more. I'm not going to list all of the roles that we have. But just to give you an idea of some of the things that you can do, this is something that doesn't really come at a cost. The staff member usually just comes forward and says, I'm really passionate about this particular topic. I have personal experience. I'd love to support other people on this. And then they just kind of make their own project out of it. So it's sort of it's not very time consuming. It's not costly. It's something that really any kind of company can organize and can introduce to their workplace. We also have a wide range of adult and youth mental health first aiders. A lot of our staff actually are first aiders, and we are always training up more staff to have that qualification, because we truly believe that anyone should be able to access support when they need it, and particularly in crisis situations, we need to make sure that our staff are supported. So this is the reason why we train as many people as possible on this, so there's always someone available when they're needed. We also have an employee assistance program with Westfield Health, which gives us access to counselling. There's also a 24/7 advice line that you can call if you're struggling with your mental health. And I've personally accessed this myself, and I found it really beneficial. It's really easy to contact them, is really easy to access, and usually the waiting times are not very long either, which if you were going through say the NHS, you'd be waiting for ages. And I know, Mark, this is something that Sarum uses as well.
Yeah, so we also use Westfield Health. We give it as a benefit to our staff, and to be honest, I completely agree with what you're saying. We've had staff members use the employee assistance program from them before. It's unbelievably good. From an employer standpoint, it's good value for money as well. It's also a good benefit for the staff member, and also retaining staff. There's benefits there, but more importantly, the moral standpoint of employees being able to access these services quickly, easily, and as part of the Westfield Health, you also get other benefits. I'm not on commission from them, I must stress, but it's I genuinely recommend it. We've also Serene have also sent people, actually not sent, to be honest. We had staff members who wanted to go on the adult mental health first aid course that Advocacy provide. And it was a pleasure to do that, really, as an organisation, because we felt a huge benefit on the return of that. And I am not on commission for Advocacy as well. But we got a big employee kind of morale bump afterwards, because we set up champions and people who can confidentially talk to each other who were not in management, actually, and that was a benefit for us. It helped a little bit demarcation there. But again, the mental health first aider course, I can't recommend enough, if I'm honest.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. I think it always helps because, Advocacy Focus is a health and social care charity. We have about 50 employees, so we are a small organisation. But Cerium, on the other hand, are a tech business and have, how many employees do you have, more or less?
So we've got 33, so we're not a big organisation either, to be honest.
But I think it just shows that if we as a charity and Cerium as a small business can provide these sort of things and can make this kind of investment, then really, anyone can. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to do big, massive events and activities. There's small things that you can do that will have a massively positive impact on your staff's well-being. And also in things like Mark has mentioned, retention. You want to keep your staff. You've spent a lot of money recruiting them, training them. You've put a massive amount of input into making that employee productive for your business. You don't want to lose that either. So moving on, just to cover the last 2 points on the slide there. So as I said, with Westfield, we get access to counselling, but then we also have a separate package of support with PH7 Health, which are a charity based in Burnley, and this is access to counselling services as well. So the reason why we have these different packages of support is because we recognise that not every individual is the same, and different people will respond to different kinds of interventions and will need different types of support. So we try to provide as much as possible. So if someone starts counselling and they feel like that type of counselling isn't really working, let's look at something else. Could we look maybe at CBT? Could we use a psychotherapist? So we really try to make sure that we provide as much as possible and as much of a tailored support as possible. And that shows, because our staff that have struggled, because they've been able to access this support, they've been able to stay in work. We've seen reduced sickness absences. We've seen even improvements in the quality of the work that they're producing. So there's a real positive impact to your business as well. And then the last one is looking at sort of policies and guidances and guidance documents, pardon me. So things like managing stress policy, supervision and support, health and well-being policies, and then also things like flexible working, dependence leave. These are all things that if you have those concrete and comprehensive policy documents, it's going to come a long way to support the employee, because they're going to know exactly what happens if they are unwell, exactly what happens if they need to be off sick, exactly what happens to their wages if they're off for a prolonged period of time. They will know that there's things like being able to change the way that they work, potentially make changes to their working hours. So just make sure that the information is readily available to your employees, because remember, not everyone is going to be able to speak up immediately. Not everyone is going to be able to come up to their manager and say, I am struggling and I don't know what I can do. So at least if you've got these documents available, they can do that research themselves. They can start to inform themselves and they can see, okay, maybe I could access this employee assistance program. Maybe if I do need to be off, I don't need to be so worried about it, because there is this package of support in place for my wages. And then that might make them more comfortable and more confident to then actually speak up and disclose of their mental health problems. So looking at signposting and support, this is just a very short signposting sheet. What I would encourage you guys to do is to actually look at services local to you as well. So the Hub of Hope is a website that is actually created by Chasing Stigma, and which you might have heard about, a mental health charity. And what you do is you put your postcode in, dead simple, couldn't be easier to use. You put your postcode in and it brings you up a list, up-to-date list of all the services local to you that could support someone's mental ill health. So that for me is always my first port of call. Like I said, it couldn't be easier, postcode and that's it, sorted. And the team at Hub of Hope put a lot of work into making sure that these services, the contact details, everything is up to date. Because the worst thing you can do is signpost someone to a certain service. That person builds up the courage to make that phone call and then the phone number is wrong, or the opening times were incorrect, or that service doesn't even exist anymore. So that's why I would always recommend you go to Hub of Hope, because you will get up-to-date information. And then the last one I will briefly talk about as well, because it's a very quick thing that you can do yourselves and you can encourage your employees to do. It's an online quiz from the NHS, 5 questions. And you fill it out and it kind of asks different questions about your stress levels, etc. And it then emails you immediately a tailored support plan with 5 things that you can do to look after your well-being. Again, super easy, really valuable, costs no money. Just do it after this session, because you will get at least one tip from that email. I can pretty much guarantee it that you will find helpful. So then looking at further training, so we provide a free online course, which is our Advocacy Friends course. It's just on our website, anyone can access it. And it basically teaches people how to build self-advocacy skills, and also some skills around advocating for others. And I think advocacy is a big word and sometimes people don't really know what that is, but really what it is, it's about speaking up for yourself when you need to. And even though we're health and social care, this course, the skills that you learn from it can really be applied to anything. If you're having a particular problem at work and you're not really sure how you're going to bring it up, you can do that free course online and it'll just give you a bit of a boost in those skills, or teach you new skills even. We then also do a mental health in the workplace, which is a 4-hour course, which basically digs deeper into some of the things that we've covered today, but we also do a lot of action planning within that course. So if you're a company that is really keen to get some initiatives implemented in your workplace, I'd really encourage you to have a chat to us and maybe get one of those courses booked with some of your staff, because it'll really help them just sit down and really brainstorm of what can they do practically to make things better, basically. And obviously we mentioned the first aid courses as well. We deliver the youth and the adult courses, and we will be offering an exclusive discount to the delegates on this course today. So if anyone wants to book a course with us, we will be offering a 10% discount to you, and the information on how to access this discount will be sent along with the slides. So I've tried to sped through that because I wanted to make sure I left loads of time for questions. Are there any questions from anyone? And you're welcome to unmute yourself at this point, or you can use the chat as well. The dreaded silence.
Vicky mentioned in the chat to begin with, actually, about people using being asked to work outside of hours and how that works and how that impacts on it. And to be honest, anyone who's not looked at the chat, I would heavily recommend have a read of that, to be honest, because what Vicky's wrote is very insightful.
Yeah, what I'll do is actually I'll read it out for the purposes of the recording, because the recording doesn't pick up on the chat. So Vicky said, in my old role, HR in retail, I did, and I would respond to the majority. I would respond the majority of time, regardless of the daytime, or if I was sitting on the beach on holiday. I felt that if there was something I could deal with there and then, it would prevent a manager dealing with the situation incorrectly incorrectly or impulsively. However, it did have a detrimental effect on my home life and mental well-being. Having the apps and emails on my phone was too tempting to just check and see what was going on. Thankfully, in my new/current role, there is a completely different expectation, and work-life balance is primary consideration for all staff, regardless of status. And I think that is absolutely crucial. And it's one of the things that I always say. And Mark at this point will be like doing a little smile, because we talked about this when we met in preparation for this session, and you saw how passionate I was about it. We need to set realistic and good expectations on our staff. If we ourselves are sending emails at a silly o'clock, if we ourselves are calling up people when they're off work, you know, ultimately our buildings aren't going to collapse unless you're in construction and there's a massive emergency. But ultimately our buildings aren't collapse if we don't reply to that email at 11 o'clock at night or at 6 in the morning. So make sure that you're setting those good expectations. And if you do notice a staff member that seems to be working a lot outside of their working hours, seems to be doing a lot of work on the weekends or whenever it is, have that conversation. So is everything okay? How are you coping with your workload? Because ultimately it's not going to be beneficial. You might think, oh great, you know, someone is working for free, but ultimately that's just going to lead to burnout. People are going to burn out, people are going to be off sick, and then you're potentially going to lose an employee because of these level of stress. They might think, you know, I don't want to work here anymore, I'll just find a different role somewhere else. So thank you for sharing that, Vicky. I think it's a really important point to make, and I think something that we should all be really, really aware of. Any other questions at all? Anyone?
Easy session, Carolina.
Well, you're going to be sent the slides for this session, of course, and along with them will be mine and Mark's contact details. So you are more than welcome to contact us at any point if anything does come up after the session.
There's a question just popped
in. What is your view of the terminology we use when discussing mental health? There appears to be a disconnect between how we term a physical issue rather than a mental health issue. Oh, they have a broken leg. Oh, they have a mental health issue. We don't say, oh, they have a physical health issue. Eleanor, are you able to maybe unmute yourself and just explain a bit more what you mean? Because I'm not sure I fully get the question, sorry.
Yeah, we just seemed, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. We just seem to always talk about it as like it's a mental health issue rather than saying depression, anxiety. We don't label it as a disease or an ill health or whatever. Whereas we would never say, oh, they're off work because they've got a physical health issue. We would say they've got a broken leg, they've got a sickness, you know, they're stomach bug or whatever. We seem to guard how we talk about mental health, and it seems to be a big issue in most of the companies I've ever been in and spoken to, that we just don't seem to want to actually label things as we all, oh, they've got anxiety. Well, why not? If they had a broken leg, we'd say they've got a broken leg. Can we normalize mental health conditions instead of going, oh, well, we'll guard them, we'll tell them, you know, it's a mental health thing?
Yeah, I get what you mean now. So I think there's two aspects to that. One of them being that sometimes with physical health issues, diagnosis can happen a lot quicker and a lot easier. You know, if you break your leg, you go into A&E, oh, you've broken your leg. Whereas with mental health, diagnosis doesn't usually happen that fast. And sometimes doesn't happen at all for a lot of people for a very long time. So sometimes someone might be presenting with symptoms of anxiety, but they might not have a formal diagnosis. And I think sometimes that might make those conversations a bit more difficult because they might not want to categorize themselves within, I have anxiety and that's why I've gotten off work. And also the other side of things is that, you know, do we need to categorize it? Do we need to overly explain ourselves? Do we need to say, this is my diagnosis? I don't have an answer for that question. I'm just opening up, putting it out there. So obviously that all stems really from the fact that language around mental health is difficult to navigate, and it's difficult to navigate because it's been made a taboo for so long. We've only really recently started talking more openly about it, and I think sometimes people lack the terminology or lack the confidence to use language because they're worried they'll get it wrong. I think a lot of times is what happens. They're worried if they say, you know, oh, this colleague is off because of anxiety. They think, oh, did I use the right words? Did I say? So I think people just find it easier to say, oh, it's due to their mental health. I don't think that fully answers your question, but hopefully it gives you a bit of a perspective of why it might be that still happens. Now, I would always encourage people to at least try to go beyond just saying it's mental health. Try to educate ourselves to learn more about these different conditions, learn more about the different symptoms that people might experience, particularly if you're supporting an employee that is living with this. But also ask the person what is their preferred terminology. I am very open in my workplace about the fact that I live with anxiety. So my colleagues know that they can say, you know, Carolina lives with anxiety, or Carolina might be off today because of her anxiety. But other colleagues might not be comfortable with that.
Sorry, that's normalizing it, which I agree with. I think that's such a good thing that people can then just talk about it. Like you would say, I live with a bad back, which I do, you know. Yeah. You know, I wouldn't say, and just picking up on what Helen said, that's brilliant. They're struggling at the moment. Yeah, you know, with what? You know, why are we glossing that over? That's not helpful necessarily to society.
I think I can definitely see what you mean, because the more openly we talk about it, the more we normalize it, the better it will be, and the more confident and comfortable people will hopefully feel to speak up when they're struggling themselves. But people also have the right to have their privacy, and to maybe, especially within the workplace, people might not want other people knowing why it is that they're struggling or why it is that they're off. And I suppose this is where we need to realize those things are very individual. And the best way to always go about it, in my eyes anyway, would be to ask the individual, you know, if someone asks, what would you like me to say? Would you like me to just say that you're off for personal reasons? Do you want to disclose yourself, why it is that you're going to be off, or why it is that you're struggling, or why it is that you've missed a meeting, whatever? Because sometimes actually people are just being nosy. And it doesn't really matter why someone's off, and it's not really their business to know. But it's about having the conversation with that particular individual and asking them what they prefer. So, for example, John is in this call. He's my land manager. And in the past, when I was poorly, we had to cancel a training session that I was due to deliver. And John asked me, would you be happy for me to cancel this session and saying that it's due to your mental ill health? So he gave me the option. He put me in control of what that narrative was going to be, and I said, yes, of course, you can tell them that it's because I'm struggling with my mental health. So I think this is the kind of I think your go-to should always be to give the individual themselves the opportunity to set their own narrative. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I totally agree. You wouldn't tell someone they've got a broken leg if that person didn't want anybody to know they've got a broken leg as well. But it's just the way we seem to want to guard any talk about like mental health as, I don't know. I don't think it helps bring it to the fore. I don't think it helps having the discussions around the different kind of conditions that people can have. And there's a general assumption that if someone's struggling, they've got depression, when there's a million different conditions out there. And we don't go, oh, they must have a sickness bug if someone's off sick. We assume they've got a specific thing, you know. And I get what you mean about it doesn't always get clarified at the beginning, but I think the obscuring of it doesn't help the discussion.
Yeah. Well, John has actually just put in the chat what I was about to say is actually that in the long term, the more we talk about mental health generally, the more we educate our staff members and colleagues about it, the more we embed mental health within the culture of our organization, the more these conversations will happen, and actually the easier it will be to normalize that terminology. And, you know, on an individual case, ask the individual, but then also think about the wider conversations that are happening in your organization and the wider organizational approach to embedding mental health into the conversations and into the culture. It's too, what's the word, what's the phrase, it's not two-sided. It's you've got the individual approach and you've got the organizational approach, and you need to look at both of them as you kind of go through this journey.
Yeah, awesome.
Thank you very much. Any other questions at all? Got anyone? I mean, any general comments? I mean, is there anything that we've covered today that you thought, oh, I didn't know that, or oh, that's really interesting? I hope there was. I hope there's just nothing. Right, okay. In that case then, we'll move on to the last couple of bits, which I always like to finish my training sessions on a bit of a self-care note. And I know when people say self-care, it can sound really fluffy. Believe me, I was one of those people that used to think, oh, self-care, yeah, let me get the candles and the bath bomb out. But actually, I've realised that self-care is extremely important, and I had to learn it the hard way because I didn't look after myself and I got really poorly. So this is the reason why I've decided to include these things in my training sessions now, to make everyone, at least for a couple of minutes, think about how they're looking after yourselves. So I don't know if you can read the slides. I know that the pictures are a bit small, but really what I would welcome you to do is to, in the chat, write down one thing that you're going to do either today, some point this week, or on the weekend to look after yourselves. Just something that you're going to do, even if it's just 5 minutes. I'll start us off. So this weekend, what I'm going to do to look after myself is I'm going to go on a nice walk with my puppy. And hopefully the weather will be nice. Mindfulness, awesome. Mark, do you want to share yours?
Yeah, I try and go for at least some kind of run for 2 or 3 times a week, because I know it helps, even though I'm not very fast and it doesn't, and it's more like a fast walk. I know it definitely helps me.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how far you go. If you're feeling the benefit, that's all that matters, really. Go out walking the dogs. Thank you, Barbara. Can I ask what dogs have you got? How many? Which breed? I want all the details. I'm a bit dog obsessed.
Clearly.
Bichon 2. Oh, excellent. Bichons, they're small dogs, aren't they? Or are they big ones? I'm gonna have to Google the breed now. Anyone else would like to share? They're big ones. Yeah, I like a big dog. We've got a golden retriever. Get creative musically. Awesome, John. Get the drum set out.
That does surprise me, John.
Excellent. Thank you very much for sharing, guys. I think, you know, I'll send these pictures separately from the slide as well, so you can read them properly, because it just gives you some ideas of things that you can do. And if you're not very good with your self-care, sometimes it can be a bit hard or a bit strange to sit down and think, what am I going to do for myself? So if you get these pictures with a few ideas, maybe that will...
Yeah, the dog.
Oh, very cute. Very cute. Hopefully it won't be muddy on your walk, because you'll come back with a different coloured dog, Barbara. Have a golf lesson. Oh, my partner has recently taken up golf. He's loving it. Very good. Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing, everyone. So last thing from me is to ask you to fill out the evaluation form, please. It's completely anonymous. It just takes literally a minute to complete. And we would really appreciate all of your feedback. And just a big thank you from me. You've been an absolute pleasure. I hope that you found it useful. I hope that you've taken something away from it, and you've got our contact details on that slide. I will be in touch this afternoon with a copy of the slides and any of the resources that I mentioned, so you'll be able to refer this back to us. And please, if you're thinking about doing anything about mental health in your workplace, if you feel like you need any support, any training, come and talk to me. Advocacy Focus is here to help. We're not in this for the money, we're in this because we've seen the worst of the mental health sector, and we want to prevent people from getting to that point. So yeah, just get in touch, and just remember, it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be big. Just do little things, because your employees will 100% appreciate it and benefit from it. And Mark, do you want to say some final words as well?
No, just thank you for your time, much appreciated. And I can only reiterate what Carolina's just said. We as an organisation found these, relatively small investments in mental health to be hugely positive. Also, from a moral standpoint, it's what we should be doing, in my opinion, because as mentioned before, there's a huge amount of stigma. And ultimately, it's a health issue. It doesn't matter what it is, it's a health issue. So I think it's worthwhile investing time into it from an organisational standpoint, but also from a personal standpoint. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your day, and thank you again for giving us some time this morning.
Yeah, cheers.